everyone, Stuart here. Thank you for dropping in. So in today's video, we're going to discuss the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, this is a text that in more recent times has become almost like part of the bedrock philosophical text of yoga. And the text is often cited. In fact, for many yoga teachers, this is kind of the go-to for our yoga definition. When someone asks us what yoga classically is, it's usually Patanjali's sutras where we get that definition from. But while many of us know a couple of different sutras, it's much less studied in detail. And yet, despite that many yoga teachers out there, super popular, really influential teachers, haven't got an in-depth knowledge of the sutras, there's at least one or two lines that each of those teachers have kept with them and lines that have helped them on their yoga journey. And so that's what I think is really valuable for us to do in this video. Instead of me going in depth to every single sutra, I'm going to share with you 5 sutras that have really helped me and that I've kept with me over the years of my studentship. I can't offer you a scholarly interpretation, although lots of what we're going to discuss has probably been founded on things that I've learned from other teachers and other commentaries and other academics. But what I wanted to offer was something that's more personal. The parts of the sutra that kind of really twigged something in me, highlighted something in me. And again, the sutra that I've kept with me for these last 10, 15 years of my practice. When you look at texts in this way, when you look at them in a more personable way, you're going to have to revise them a little. And some will say that's heresy, and I'm cool with that. I'm cool to be called out and say that isn't what the text is about. You're just reinterpreting it for your own thoughts. And yes, I probably am. But this is where I'm going to put my flag in the sand and say, this is why I believe a revision and a modern interpretation of these texts is valid and actually needed. So first of all, I'm speaking in the context of contemporary yoga, because that's the only yoga I know. And secondly, I teach all my students to work with the parts of the practice that mean something for them. Because I believe the essence of yoga isn't in a strict adherence to its texts, but in finding the inspiration out of the text that helps guide your life. Also, just to note that opening sentence that I'm teaching in the context of modern yoga is more tantric in its worldview and even in its practice. It's really a practice of embodiment, where the body's used as a tool or a vehicle for our physical, mental and spiritual freedom. The yoga that is described by Patanjali in the sutras is really viewed as a transcendental practice. So it's about overcoming the limitations of the body and the mind to reach a state of freedom or fulfillment. Patanjali was also a dualist, and his outlook on life was probably more from a renunciate's viewpoint. I'm neither of those things. Now, despite the difference in our worldviews and our opinions, again, I'm more tantric in my view and my understanding, I still think the text has real gold in there. And with a little bit of modern improvisation and revision, I feel that there are 5 keynotes that I can share with you that are going to help you on your studentship and on your yoga teaching. Let's begin with some background though, and many of you already know this, maybe from your 200 hours training, but I think it's really valuable for us to have some foundation and context to our discussion. So the Yoga Sutras, I would say, view it as a roadmap of yoga practice and how to view the world. So a good philosophical starting point. It was written some 2,000 years ago, in between the 1st and the 3rd century. And despite its longevity and despite being written so long ago for a people with a different culture, a different set of beliefs and living with different society standards, much of what's in there, or lots of what's in there, is really relevant for us today. Now, you're not going to open the text and find how to place your feet in Warrior 2 or any stick figure drawings or even some direction on how long to hold your breath for before you jump into an ice bath. But it's packed with wisdom that we can interpret into our yoga practice and back into our lives. Importantly for me, you can be atheist, you can be agnostic, you can be a devotee of any religion, you can follow any philosophical or political worldview, and you can still learn from the sutras without compromising who you are or what you believe in. The sutras are best viewed, as with many of the texts of yoga, as teachings on the mind, on life, and in many ways deeper than that, on our sense of being, our sense of connection with ourselves, and our sense of connection with the rest of the world. Now, the sutras themselves, they don't give much away. They're usually one line. They're very direct. And we can't really get much from that line, hence why we need the scholarly commentaries or the gurus who have worked with these practices and been passed down their wisdom through lineages. So much of what we discuss today has a foundation in what I've read and what I've studied from my teachers and what they've shared with me. But then what I've looked to do is try to reinterpret them into what I've been able to apply in my life. We're going to start with Sutra 1.1. Right at the start seems the most relevant and best place to start our discussion. So here we have now the practice of yoga. Now at first glance it doesn't seem all that in depth as to what we can gain out of it. But when we start to consider some more of the background context, it's a really dramatic opening to the book. This now, the teaching of yoga, has dual meaning. So firstly, and for me the most important part, is that it's saying now, at this point, finally now. Now you're ready for the journey of yoga. Now you're ready to learn yoga. It's probably the sutra I cite most to students when they have that kind of aha, the epiphany moment in class. And they come to you and they feel or they proclaim that yoga has massively changed their life and shifted their life in so many different ways. They're not really sure how, but it's affirmed something in them. And then what happens is the conversation usually starts to revolve around, it's changed my life and I wish I found this earlier and I wish I knew all of this stuff at school. But then what I always come to is I say, well, the truth is, only now were you really ready for all of this. Only now, with the events that have happened in your life to this point, have you come to a point in your life, have you arrived at a place where this incredible tradition that has helped millions upon millions of people for centuries and centuries, in fact for millennia, now you're ready for it. And you wouldn't have connected to it in the same way at school or in that past relationship. The great value in this is now you're ready. Now is your time. And when you experience that, this is the moment. It's always the encouragement of the teacher to go, now you've got to go in. Now you go deep. Now you go 2-footed challenge into this because you're ready for yoga. It's a deep dive. Now, the second note that it carries is the whole idea of being present, living in the now. Eckhart Tolle, his seminal work, The Power of Now, that's the book that's captivated millions of people and brought millions of people worldwide to the meditation practice, and then from there often the yoga practice. And its insights are world renowned for being transformative. They've helped people embrace the present moment, help people get better relationship with their thoughts, their emotions, their pasts and their agitations and anxieties of the future. That's what this note is. The practice is all about getting into the now, living in this present state of awareness and finding deeper connection with existence as it happens in the present moment. The present moment is the only reality that we ever truly experience. The past is just a collection of memories and the future is just projections of our mind. It hasn't happened yet. The key to true fulfillment, to true peace, to true joy and engagement with life is being in the now. It's this timeless dimension of the now, and that is yoga. The second teaching I want to share is another common one, and it's the second sutra. After Patanjali says, now you're ready for yoga, then he defines what yoga is. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. That's the one that I said at the start that many yoga teachers can recite, and we often lean to as a definition of yoga. And it also gives us an idea of Patanjali's purpose. So this translates as the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind, or the stopping of the fluctuations of the mind. So for me, this is where we get our first revision. I wouldn't expect and even try to attempt for your yoga practice and your meditation practice to mean stilling your mind, blocking your mind, a complete silencing of thought or a complete pausing of an emotional bubbling up or feeling. If you try to stop yourself thinking, if you try to stop yourself feeling, you're going to be in pain. So I wouldn't describe any of the practices as stop thinking or stop feeling emotions. Instead, from my experience, I feel that the practice is more about becoming aware of your feelings and your thoughts. And in doing so, being aware that they constantly change. They have a changing nature. Our thoughts flicker from one thing to the next, and our emotions change from one feeling to another. But I am not my thoughts or my emotions. I don't need to solely identify with my thoughts or my emotions. I don't need to collapse around them. Even though we say with our language, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, in reality we're not. We are something for a moment of time experiencing the emotion of anger, experiencing the sensations of anxiety. But we are not anxiety, we are something other than that. And when you can do this as a practice with yoga or with meditation, then it creates distance from those emotions and those thoughts. And as we create distance from them, then we get better relationship with them. So instead of acting and reacting from a place of great emotional disturbance or instinct, we get opportunity to recognize these are momentary afflictions, momentary thoughts, momentary emotions, and we get better at stepping back and choosing how we respond to them. The third sutra I want to touch on involves two terms, ambhyasa and vairagya. Ambhyasa means practice. That's what we are as yoga students. We are practitioners of yoga, but also practitioners of life. There's no completing yoga, like there's no completing life. There's no final destination. It's a lifelong studentship of practice. And modern science has shown us that when we practice anything, when we offer ourselves and commit to specific actions within our life, we get better at them. This is called plasticity. We are basically moldable plastic for our entire life. And throughout the course of our life, we have this incredibly amazing opportunity and chance to change and develop and grow in line with what we practice. So what we practice is incredibly important because we become that. The things that we practice, we get better at. The things that we practice and include in our lives, we become. The second part is vairagya. So this is the term for non-attachment. You hear this all the time in yoga. Non-judgment and non-attachment. They're kind of two of our really big principles to live by. But here there's a clear distinction between not being attached to something and not caring about something. Just like, I'm not attached to it because, I'm not bothered by it. That's not what it is. There's a really good Zen proverb that says, non-attachment doesn't mean that we don't own anything. It doesn't mean that we don't love or have anything. It means that nothing owns us. So we're not controlled by things. So if you put these two teachings together then, how do we practice yoga and our relationships and our occupation and get better at those things? How do we continue to improve and grow and practice and dedicate our action and our time to something and yet not get attached to it? So for me, I feel this is to do with outcome and expectation. Now, there's another great text of yoga called the Bhagavad Gita. For me personally, I feel that's the richer text of yoga philosophy, and we'll definitely do some deep dives in videos for that too. As you start to continue through your studentship and your teaching, these will be great references for you to come back to. Now in that text, Krishna, who's talking to Arjuna, he has this incredible line where he says, do not be attached to inaction. You have the right to act, but you do not have the right to the fruit of your actions. So for me, this means that you can control your actions, but not the outcome. You can practice things, but you can't have the expectation that your practices are going to lead to a specific outcome. And we know that because there are so many external factors involved in life. Just because I practice handstands every day doesn't mean that in 3 months' time I'm going to be able to do a handstand. But what it does mean is that if I practice handstands every day, I'm going to get better at handstands. If we look at this in a more humanistic context, just because I do good for people and support them doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to get that same grace back. And if I do those things with any expectation of that outcome, then I'm destroying the action itself and I'm going to suffer. If I support someone because I expect them to do the same back, so I'm doing good to receive good, well, then all I'm going to get is resentful if that same thing isn't going to come back to me, so I get upset. And if the same support is offered back to me, it's likely I'm not going to value it as much because, well, I expected it because I did something good for you. So of course you should do something good for me. So in both of these scenarios, I suffer. And it's all my own doing because I'm attaching to the expectation of my actions. In truth, the action is the reward. The doing is the reward. And in yoga practice, the yoga practice is the reward, not the specific posture that we perform, not the handstand. The reward, the benefit, the value of the practice, physically, energetically, psychologically, spiritually, it's in the practice, not the outcome. So this teaching emphasizes that to progress in yoga, to progress and grow and develop in life, it comes from consistent and persistent effort, combined with this incredible ability to detach from the expectation of the outcome. We have the right to act, but not the right to the fruits of our actions. You act because that's where the reward is. Okay, let's do two more. So in the second pada, this is where we're introduced to the 8 limbs of yoga. And this is a yogic system that Patanjali outlined as a direct means for us to experience transcendence, for us to overcome the limitations of our mind and our physical bodies. It's in this 8-limb system where we find the word asana, which is a term that we now associate with yoga postures. In this context, it's more in the sense of sitting in meditation. We also find pranayama, which is a term we give for breathing exercises, and we find dhyana, which is the Sanskrit term for meditation. Now, importantly here, underpinning these 3 practices that we commonly know as part of the yoga tradition, we have yamas and the niyamas. And these are the ethical and moral practices connected with yoga. So here, yoga isn't just about getting bendy and strong and focusing your mind. It's about being good to yourself and being good in the world, finding value in what you do in the world, finding your place and how you can contribute to the world to make everything a better place. Now, 2 of these ethical standards are the ones that resonate with me the most. There's discipline and surrender. In the West, we have funny relationships with both of these terms. Discipline seems kind of connected to like violence or anger or aggravation. You know, you hear the term, you need more discipline, or your child needs discipline. It's often said in this really hateful, resentful, overbearing, aggressive way. But there's another way to look at this principle, and it's the way I believe that the tradition actually looks at it. If we take the term discipline and we follow its root back in Latin, it shares a root with disciple. And when you think of disciple, you don't think of anger or violence, you think of devotion and love. A disciple follows their teacher, not because they're scared of them, but because they're motivated to do so out of a deep respect for their message or a great love for their message. So if we know that disciple came from the same root that discipline came from, well then discipline is really born from love. And when you think of your yoga practice, yes, there's loads of great physical benefits and mental benefits, and that motivates us to take up the practice and initially stick with it. But as we continue, it's our love that keeps bringing us back. It's our love for the people that we practice with, for our teacher, for what the tradition teaches us. It's love that brings us back on those dark, rainy nights, on those grey mornings, to roll our mat out. And as an addition to this, that love gives us the discipline to keep showing up week after week, day after day. And it's the discipline that gives us freedom. We find freedom in our bodies and freedom in our mind from our commitment and our discipline. Second term we said was surrender, and there's 2 teachings in here. There's surrender and faith, and they're 2 different sutras that I'm going to combine together. Now, when I was brought up by one parent who was devoutly religious and one who was an atheist and completely opposed to religion. So that was quite a unique cognitive dissonance that I lived with. But I also feel it gave me really great objectivity with the world and with many of the practices that I've come to love. From my mum, I would pray 5 times a day, and I was an absolute devotee because of my love and my worship for my mum when I was younger. I was the child of all of us who was all in. So I'd pray 5 times a day. I'd read the Bible for 10 minutes every night before bed. I read it from cover to cover for many, many, many years. And my mum's favourite Bible verse was something that was kind of etched into my heart. And it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean upon your own understanding. In all your ways, make notice of him, and he will make your path straight." So basically, trust in God, surrender to his will, and he will make your path straight. Everything that you should have within your life will be given to you in your life. So then in discussions with my dad, he would teach me to think for myself, not believe everything that I was told, and don't believe everything that I should read. As I got older, I completely rebelled against religion. I found drugs and music and women and completely rejected anything that wasn't remotely material or felt religious or spiritual in any way. Then yoga came along, and then I found that yoga had this teaching, surrender to God. So, and that is the direct translation of it in the sutras, surrender to God. So I remember coming across this and taking a breath for a moment, because until that point, I was told that yoga wasn't religious and it didn't involve a belief in any God or any specific faith base, things that you hear all the time from yoga teachers. And then I'm reading on paper one of Patanjali's niyamas, surrender to God. So I'm kind of like, okay, so this is the thing that I rejected all those years ago when I was going through kind of my wild phase, and now I'm reading the same line again. So then now, full disclosure, in the years since me finding yoga and developing a greater relationship with the practice, I actually have built a personal relationship with God. I don't teach this because it's only a personal thing to me. I don't follow any religion at all. I'm not affiliated with any religion in any way. And I don't teach it my students because I'm not trying to convert anyone to my personal beliefs. My personal beliefs are my own relationships, and it really has nothing to do with my teaching and nothing to do with my yoga. Also, as I outlined at the start, yoga is a philosophy and practice that is open to being atheist, agnostic, a devotee, or any political or philosophical affiliation. You don't need to be religious because it's not a religious doctrine at all. So again, we come back to this line, surrender to God. Well, if we replace God with the universe, which is what everybody does these days, because we all feel a little bit, not all, but many people feel a bit weirded out by the term God, and we replace it with universe. So quite a lot of people go, trust the universe and manifest and have faith in the universe. And then we also get gratitude practice. What is it you're offering your gratitude towards? Who are you speaking to when you're practicing gratitude practices? Now, for me, all of these are actually born out of prayer, but we'll kind of save that for another day without diving down that rabbit hole. But really they're just different ways of using language. We have trust, we have faith, we have manifest, we have gratitude. These are all surrender practices. So I have trust that the life I'm living and the experiences that come my way are the right ones to help me grow and help me develop. They're not necessarily the ones that I wanted. They're not the most attractive ones. They're not even the most just ones. And in fact, in many cases, they're definitely unjust. But they're the ones that I needed, and they're the ones that I have. And each of them, if I can surrender to them, if I can fight with them less and resist them less, then maybe I get greater opportunity to learn from them, to grow, to develop, and maybe even the really unjust ones and the ones that are traumatic. Maybe if I can even surrender to those, I get opportunity to help and heal myself and maybe help and heal others through them. And this is where faith comes in. Faith is another teaching from the sutras that when you're told it's non-religious and you have had a part of your life where you're quite opposed to religion and spirituality, feels quite uncomfortable, because faith is kind of like a blind faith that, well, everything will work out in the end, and everything that happens is this divine plan, and just trust in it and have faith in it and everything will work out. And that's quite hard to do when you come to a more analytical and scientific mind. But Shraddha and faith is another really important teaching within the practice, very similar to surrender. There's always a certain amount of faith in yoga practice. There's faith in the teacher, that they're going to guide you in the right way that is right for you, and they're going to support you in the way that's right for you. There's faith as a student in the practice, that the practice is going to give me the physical and psychological, the emotional, the energetic experiences that I need. Again, it might not be the ones that I want, and it's very unlikely to be the ones that I expect or expected, but I have faith that it will be the right ones. And sometimes the right ones are the hardest moments, the hardest lessons, the hardest experiences. But further down the line, I'm grateful for them because they were the right ones at that moment to help me move through and peel this layer of skin off that I'm currently in now. It helped me shed this skin and grow and move on. And so if I can dedicate my actions to a higher power, maybe acknowledging there's a supreme consciousness, or even just a higher ideal, something that's out of my own personal ego or my own personal benefit, then it encourages me to cultivate humility, trust, and devotion, beautiful qualities of being human. And this type of surrender, it's not a passive thing. It's not like I'm resigning to something. It's actually really active and dynamic. It's about engaging with life and trusting the process of life to a higher purpose. That if I engage with it to the best of my ability, everything that is meant to come my way will come my way. But if I don't engage with it to the best of my ability, then maybe I'm going to miss out on the things that I was destined for. So in conclusion, despite the text being 2,000 years old, despite it being a very different yoga to what we practice now, even a different philosophical view, despite it being written for a different culture and for different spiritual understandings even, there's some real gold in there. And I've only touched on 5 fundamental ideas, 5 ideas that really resonate with me. I would encourage you to take a deeper dive in the Yoga Sutras after you finish your 200-hour yoga training and when you can really dedicate some time to sitting with the teachings. And there are many courses that you can find out there, many teachers who are very well versed in the Yoga Sutras. I myself have more additional courses that I would love to practice with you and share with you. And if you're interested in those, please reach out. But for now, what I want to leave you with is that these texts have real wisdom, and that wisdom is found in your capacity to listen to the teachings and then try to find ways in which it applies to your life. And remember, not everything will. Not everything that text is going to be relevant for you right now in your life. But some of the gold in there, some of the diamonds in there will. And there'll be a great support for your yoga practice as a student, for your continued practice as a teacher, but more importantly, they'll be a great support for you and a great way for you to develop and grow as a being, as a person in this beautiful place that we call Earth. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've got some value from what we've discussed today. Have a great day, and I will see you again in practice very shortly. Take care.